Hi all, welcome back to Beanie Composter. It's 2023 now, so Happy New Year to everybody. Over Christmas, had a few questions from some people. So I've had a couple of questions from Damien. Now he's had his Hotbin running for 3 months now from scratch, and he just emptied it over Christmas, and he sent me a few photos. He was a bit concerned about whether the stuff was ready, and we'll leave some pictures because he was happy for us to put them on the channel of some of the compost he's made. But he's concerned about he's getting too much leachate at the moment. So Damien, don't worry about this. I'll show you what temperature our Hotbin is at. It's been running really well just recently, and 8:30 this morning I came out here, and the tray that we've got down below on this Mark 1, I completely emptied it, and we're coming up to almost 11:30 now, so that's 3 hours, if my maths is good, that we've been collecting leachate. So I'll show you what's going on with our leachate and how much we're collecting. So in 3 hours we've collected this amount, which I would say is quite a lot in 3 hours, so I wouldn't worry, Damien, about that. And I'm just storing it at the moment in like little bottles, and I'm going to use that to water over the grass and the beds come spring sort of time when it's not as wet on the ground. So if I'm opening and shutting the top like that, you'll physically see leachate coming out of the bottom. The next question Damien was concerned about was the wetness of his compost inside, or waste inside the Hotbin. So I'm going to show you what mine is at the moment. So we're running nice and hot there. We were a little bit hotter, but I've been opening and fannying around with the bin doing all this filming, so you know we are at good temperatures. When you give your Hotbin a good stir around, if you're putting cardboard and paper in, if that's all wet and like soggy like that, then I think you kind of need to be putting that amount of paper in again, if not a little bit more. But if you are stirring it around and like you've got bits of torn cardboard or bits of paper that is like in clumps that is really dry, then probably you've got the paper, maybe you're putting a bit too much paper and cardboard into your Hotbin. So that's sort of an indication I always go by. If you are putting paper in and it's, you know, it's all wet and soggy, then, you know, add that amount of paper again, if not a little bit more. But when you open your bin after a feed and you're giving it a little stir around and there's like cardboard that is still really dry, so say you got a bit like this and there's clumps and it's all like still quite dry, then you're probably adding a bit too much paper and cardboard into your Hotbin, so I would reduce that a little bit. So this is, I'll give it a bit of a stir around. So you can see there, that's just paper that I put on the top. That's still dry, so to me I think I've got, you know, the paper consistency pretty much spot on. Now we're not bone dry, so there's some dryness there. But I still think, you know, I wouldn't be adding more paper, because I think when I look at that I can see that it's still got some dry parts in there, so I think, like I'm saying, I've got that pretty much spot on. But if all the paper was soaking wet and there wasn't, you know, any dry bits there, then I would be inclined to add a bit more paper. Now if we smell I know you can't smell this, but if I smell this, to me I can smell a little bit of a almost ammonia smell, because I think we've had a lot of wet stuff in there, but it doesn't smell bad. It just smells like almost if you put a lot of grass in your hot bin, you'll get that ammonia, almost wee sort of smell, but it's not smelling bad at all. So that's another sign that the compost is at a good consistency. So we've got a lot of wet stuff in here, but although it is, if I squeeze it together, we can see that it's holding its shape, but if I give it a little bit of a, you know, fiddle with my fingers, it falls apart. Now for me that's a good sign that things are quite good at the moment. So I'm sort of clumping that together, and it's not what I call, it's holding itself together, but it's not what I call a massive clump of, like you would have like clay or earth. And you can see I've got quite a lot of bulking agent in there where we've had to cut down a hedge over Christmas, but it falls apart quite easily. And I wouldn't say that's, you know, it's not what I call wet, but we've still got quite a lot of moisture in there from all the peelings and that. So I always give it a nice stir every time before I feed it, as you know if you watch the channel. And we can see, you know, a lot of steam coming out of this, and that clumps of paper there is where I put it on the top. So I always sort of distribute that when I give it a good stir around.
Over Christmas, we wanted to get the new broadband a little bit faster. What happened was the man came with a long stick and started poking the hedge, and then he found that the massive opening to the broadband is right there under the hedge. So all of this until here was the hedge. We needed to cut probably 2 meters completely off. Beanie nearly exploded. So I did most of the work. We've got the broadband, but now he's happy having tons of bulking agent. Probably it's going to be alright for another 10 years.
Yeah, we had a proper massive pile of wood that it's taken me a few days to sort out, but I've managed to cut quite a lot of it, which I can't use as bulking agent, and I've actually tried to put it into the hedge to make it quite neat and not look too intrusive. But as you can see just here, we've still got, and at the back of the house, we've still got plenty to use as bulking agent. Another question was, Damien said he was putting lots of vegetable peelings, and if that was contributing to having too much leachate. Well, probably yes it is, but if I show you what we're putting into our hot bin with a feed, I know this on the channel, I've shown this many times, but this is just more trying to show it a bit more in detail. That's what I've got in the bucket at the moment. And then this morning I've just been round the front. If it's dry and you can pick a few weeds, you know, I always find there's some weeds around our garden somewhere to be picked, so they're going in, and I find that just helps. And so if you can get stuff like your weeds and that are dry, then that is a good thing to put in your hot bin even this time of the year. And then there's the kitchen caddy, which, you know, everyone's is going to be different, but you'll probably have similar things in. So we've got eggshells, they always go in. The oldest boy's back from uni at the moment, and he makes a coffee pretty much every day, so we've got coffee granules or whatever they're called. We've got a bit of cereal that's been wasted there, and sprouts that we've peeled, so lots of vegetable peelings there. So at the moment, mainly coffee granules, sprouts, some satsuma peelings, lots of eggs because Mrs. B made a cheesecake for New Year. So if we look at what's going on in here, we've got obviously the bulking agent, eggshells, and then we've got apple cores, the sprouts, the bits of curly kale that we've just cut up, and those bits of weeds in there, and I can see that's not too wet, so I probably wouldn't add too much paper to this one. Now a lot of time I do try to put a little bit of food waste in there, so if we've got scraps of maybe an old sandwich that little un hasn't eaten, and I sometimes get bits of bread that are just end trimmings that are just either they've gone hard or we don't use them, I'll try and put some bread into there as well, because I always find that helps with not only the temperature, but it also helps keep your hot bin a little bit drier as well. So if you can get some old sort of bread, you know, pastries, whatever, that, you know, they're stale, out of date, or, you know, they're just getting wasted, then that is a good idea. If you can, try and put a little bit of that into your hot bin as well. When I'm adding my waste into the bucket to put into the hot bin, I kind of do a little assessment just of what's going in there, how wet that waste is. Sometimes I can pour the kitchen caddy in there and it's been sitting in the kitchen for a couple of days and it's literally dripping at the bottom, so I try and drain a bit of that water off before it goes in, but I can see it's quite wet, so I will always add more paper to that if it is wetter. But this one here, we can see it's not really too wet. When it comes to feeding the hot bin, you saw I gave it a good stir round, and over Christmas it just seemed to be every day Amazon delivery lorry was coming to the door with a parcel. So I had tons of cardboard that I was using, but we've kind of come to the end of that, so I'm back onto the shredded paper as I think you saw in the hot bin. But Mrs. B goes through more eggs than I don't know what, but we've got egg boxes. I always make sure I tear them up and put them into the hot bin, because I find they do absorb a lot of moisture and they're just quite easy to tear up. They don't take too long. So bin open, and before I put any waste in, if I've got the egg boxes, I'll always put them in first, because I find they're easier, because it's all torn up, they're easier to sort of distribute into the base bit. So let's hope you've got this on camera, because things are going a bit tits up with this phone today. But we've got the egg boxes in there, and then the waste that I've got in the bucket, I just literally pour that straight in. And then all I've got left now is shredded paper. So because I find this doesn't mix in so easily, I just put a little bit to start with. And then I don't go too mad with this stirring, because I'll give it all a good stir up previous before I put this waste in. So I'm just literally stirring the top waste onto, you know, the old waste. The fresh stuff's just getting stirred in a little bit just to mix it all together. And then I'm also, while I'm doing this, I'm kind of assessing what's going on if there's enough paper in there. That's distributed what I'd call quite well, the paper. Just because it is January and it's quite sort of cold still and damp, I always put like a good handful of shredded paper, or it would be torn up cardboard over the top, just to help things out. Now,
sorry, why didn't...
Now I don't mix that in, but because we've got like the steam coming up and some will vaporize and sort of drip back down, I just find putting a little bit on top there just helps to absorb some of that moisture up. So that's what I do, and then literally as you would, I put the dials back in. We've had this opening quite a bit today, so probably lost a little bit of heat there. But as you can see there, the dial's gone up pretty quick and we're back in the green in no time on that one. The short one's going to be lagging behind because that's literally only going into like the fresh sort of waste, which is probably quite cold anyway. But that just shows you what I'm doing to make sure my compost is quite dry. So Damien had his first empty, and from what I saw in the pictures, he done really well. So congratulations, Damien, on your first Hotbin composting empty. But I think he was a little bit concerned that he hadn't put the hatch door back on properly. So I'm going to do that and show you how you just take your hatch door off, have a check to see if it is back, you know, if anything's stuck there, and put it back on while your Hotbin is up and running. So you don't need to wait until you're emptying your Hotbin for this. Oh, you see all those flies falling off there? Look. Just all died. So I've taken the cam straps obviously up so we can get the hatch door off. And then it's just a case of, if you do think you've put it on and it's not actually on right, now you can see with ours here it's real bowed out with age, so like I said in the comments, I wouldn't really worry too much about rain getting in there. But if you do want to take it off just to check, you might have thought you've got a bit of bulking agent that's stuck and the door's not on properly, you can just prise it off. And if we look there, that's nice and solid. We can see there is you know, nice compost, but we're not quite done there. There's a few worms. So if you get to this stage where you can get a cloth and you can go down the sides here, around here, just check that that's all nice and free from anything, so there's no big lumps of bulking agent that may be preventing your hatch door from going on nice and snugly. So just check around the edges. If you want, you can give it a wipe down. But what I'm trying to say is, when you've got it at this stage, it's just going to stay like that. So you can literally take your hatch door off, check what's going on. If you're not happy with maybe the way you put your hatch door back on, you think...
Speak to me, not to the compost.
Okay. Why didn't you tell me earlier?
Whoa!
Okay,
I
let's
thought
film
maybe
it now.
at some point
All right.
you can do it, but obviously not. And this, all I have is this.
Well, move it out of the way then.
Can you just do something about that?
Okay, I think Mrs. B has finished having a hissy fit now, so we can carry on. What I was trying to explain was, once you've taken your hatch door off like this, that is going to stay like that. Okay, what I'm trying to say is that is going to stay like that while you've got time to clean around the edges, clean your hatch door and get it prepared so you can put it back on how you want to. So, as I say, give it all the clean around, and with your hatch door, just give that a good clean off as well. I mean, I'm not going to, but just make sure your edges are nice and clean, and that should just slip on nice and easily push that, too. As I'm saying, ours is a bit bowed now, so it doesn't actually go on as snug as originally when I first got it, but that's just part and parcel of the Hotbin. And then put your cam straps back down, pull them nice and tight, and the job's a good one. While we are filming this video, I actually just looked at the Mini. Although we're not using it at the moment, I've kind of had it just sitting here probably since way before Christmas. Since we had like quite a bit of heavy rain, it's just sat there, and I haven't had the hatch door properly put on and cam strapped all up. So I'm gonna have a look to see if any water's got into this one. So the aeration valve, although it's not as open as much as the one I'm using on the larger one at the moment, that's what it's been at since I've had it sort of closed down. We're not actually using it at the moment. Cam strap's not tightened up, and as you can see, the door is not actually pushed on properly, so we've got gaps in between, right down the bottom. It's actually sticking out quite a lot here, but I'll just pull that off. And then if I take the base plate bit out, you can see we have got some water in there, but I wouldn't say we've got, well, that's what's coming out with like the rainfall that we've had. But this has been, I'd say it's got to be a couple of months if not more, and we've had some real heavy rain. But that is the hatch door not even completely sealed on, so rain will get into your Hotbin, but I don't think so much will. This is going to seem a little bit strange because we're filming a week after we actually recorded the first video, the part you've probably been watching, but I actually thought of a question that Damien asked me, which was regarding worms. Now, he was like asking a question about, do I put worms in the Hotbin myself, as in personally find them and put them in the Hotbin? Well, the answer to that is no. I never put any worms into the Hotbin. In fact, I take them out. So I'm not 100% sure how worms get into the Hotbin. My feelings are, when you dig up weeds and that, although you're supposed to shake off as much earth as possible, I'm sure on the roots you get the worm eggs on maybe those clumps of roots, that when you put it into the Hotbin, when it's cold at the bottom, they actually just hatch, and then they go down to the bottom where it's a lot cooler, and that's where you get all the worms starting to develop. If you do have your Hotbin running quite hot for a while and then suddenly it does go really cold, if you do manage to start your Hotbin up again, you can sometimes find a lot of worms will come up to the top. So that is because the Hotbin is heating up and they're trying to escape. But like I say, the answer to this question is I never put worms into the Hotbin. They just seem to come there somehow themselves. If you do get an instance where you're seeing lots of worms coming up and you want to rescue them, then like I do it, I just take them out with my hands, put them into either compost that I've got sitting in bags, or just put them onto the garden, and either the birds will get them or they'll make their way into your soil. But definitely a good thing to have in your compost and your soil, so if you can rescue them, it's always a good idea, because if your Hotbin is getting hot and they're trying to escape, they're probably not likely to get out, and they'll just end up getting steamed and then just fall back into the Hotbin, and there'd be no use to no one.
Anyone.
Alright. Another question was, when you empty your Hotbin and you put everything back together, so you've taken your compost out and you've got the stuff that's left in there that hopefully hasn't collapsed, but you've put all the hatch door, the straps and that back on, do you have to give it a good stir up to help the compost fall right to the bottom? I always do that after I've emptied the Hotbin. I always give it a really good stir up, so like all the new stuff that's on the top will fall to the bottom. But the answer is I always give it a good stir up once I've emptied the hot bin, just to help it naturally collapse down, because I just don't think it does that on its own naturally. And I do find that if you can feel sort of pockets of air where it hasn't completely collapsed, if you help to aid that along, it tends to help with the compost coming up to temperature quicker. And also, by giving that a helping hand, you also create more space in your hot bin, so you've got more room in there to add more waste, so it doesn't fill up quicker. So first and foremost, we'd like to say thank you to Damien for taking the time to write all these comments and ask questions, because this is exactly what the channel's about. It's about having people on the channel that can help each other out. If you have got any concerns about your hot bin, why it's not heating up, or just ask questions, type away. And we've got an email now that Damien sent his pictures on, so anyone else who wants to send us some photos of what's going on with their hot bin, or even just a little video clip of, you know, why their hot bin isn't heating up, we can maybe have a look at that, put it on the channel and try to solve your issues. So until next time, happy composting and enjoy.